Behind me is Mark Rogers. He's the sports agent for Russell Wilson. Russell is one of the athletes I spent a lot of time with, but you know, years ago he was just trying to make it as a high school student, as a baseball player. He was too small, all sorts of different things. I don't think we ever thought. When he first came to Bradenton, Florida, I used to run a place called IMG Academy. When he first came out to Bradenton, Florida, I don't think we thought that he would end up becoming what he's become. You know, and now he, from being 5'9" and too small and not a good enough baseball player and a lot of different challenges, being asked to leave to be at North Carolina State to go to Wisconsin, have a unique journey, and 2 weeks ago he became the highest paid player in the history of pro football. And you never know how it happens, so I'm going to share with you a couple stories. So I spend a lot of time in football, but we'll use that as an example, whether you're very serious about it or not. But when we first got to the University of Alabama, the goal in college football is, truthfully, to try to win a ring. Okay? So a national championship ring is sort of a metaphor, speaks to a much bigger example. It speaks to sort of what the accomplishment is. A lot of our players come from South Florida. A lot of our players from St. Thomas, Dalvin Cook. A lot of our from Miami Killian, from a lot of the different places. But I'll never forget. It really struck me. Our very first day. So we're at the University of Alabama. It's 2007. Now, Coach Saban had been the head coach of the Dolphins, and our first year did pretty well. We were 9-7. Second year we were 6-10, and struggled a little bit. So we get to Alabama. At that point, there was no, all the rings, all the championships. It was just another coach looking for an opportunity. At that point, we had 120 football players, really primarily from the South, from Florida, from Alabama, from Georgia, from Mississippi. And the team had won 6 games and lost 6 games the year before. Now, one thing you're going to get in the time we spend together, I'll just tell you some basic stories. There's no magic. Like, life has all sorts of unique challenges. I was 18 years old, not much older than many of you, and I thought I had everything going. I was diagnosed with cancer at 18. Changed my life probably forever. There's different challenges that we face all the time. But a couple things I want you to think about today is the simplicity of the stories I'm going to tell you. Because I don't think anything that, if you ask, well, what makes Cam Newton this way, or why is Russell Wilson this way, or Josie Altidore, if you follow soccer, this way, or Sierra or Serena, it's never, in my opinion, been the really complicated things. It's been how they handle the basic things. Okay? But when we first got there, Nick Saban, he held up an apple in his left hand and a bag of Doritos in his right hand. 120 guys were sitting in there, and he said, this was the first thing in that first team meeting. Do you really need a nutritionist to tell you which of these is better for you? It's the first statement he made. Do you really need a nutritionist to tell you which is better? You have the Doritos and the apple. He said, it's in that answer that will define the direction of this program. Because nothing that's going to allow us to become the best version of ourselves is going to be more complicated than that. But I can't lie to you and tell you that Doritos doesn't taste better than an apple, but you can't choose both. Not if you want to be a great athlete, not if you want to be a great, and it's that simple. The gifts you have as a student, as an athlete, someone gave you those. Okay, but what you do with those is going to be as simple sometimes as choosing between a bag of Doritos and choosing between an apple. I want to tell you another story that he also shared. There's a guy that runs a magazine, and it's called Forbes magazine. It's just, you read it for these people that got all sorts of Beamers and all these things. Now, one of the things Coach would share is this guy told his story about how he became one of the more successful people in our country. When the guy was in high school, he was a junior, and he was from the Midwest, and he was about to get kicked out of high school. He had a lot of issues with substance abuse and academics, and he was really struggling. So, and obviously turned it around, but he promised his mother in 11th grade he would take this test called the SAT. I don't know if anybody's heard, they still have the SAT?
Yeah.
So the SAT in the 80s was out of 2 parts. It was a math part, and it was a verbal part. It was both scored out 800 points. So your total was 1,600 points. Well, this guy, had really struggled throughout high school. So when he took the test, he obviously didn't assume that he would do well. Okay, so he takes the test in May his junior year because his mom wanted him to, and then he gets the score back in June, and he gets a 1480 out of 1600. Okay, now he's stunned. And his mother, knowing her son, just what any good mom would do, she says, "Did you cheat?" Right? She knows her son. She knows his ass would try to cheat. Right? So she says, "Did you cheat?" He said, "I swear to God, I tried to cheat, Mom, but the seats were too far apart, and we had a little scantron, a little bubble. I couldn't cheat." So she says, "You mean to tell me you really got that score?" And he says, "All I can tell you, Mom, is I took the test. I got that score." So psychology, they call this thing called cognitive dissonance. When you see something that doesn't, it's not who you think you are. Okay, for better or for worse. So he's done. The summer goes. He's technically still enrolled as a senior at this school in Kansas. So he's going to be a senior in high school. He says, "Well, since I know I'm smart now, I'll go to class this year." Okay, as Coach tells the story. So he starts going to class. Well, the teachers see him in class. He'd never really been to class that often. They start to treat him differently. And now that he's going to class, he's not hanging out with people he used to, as he tells the story. Guy graduates from the school, goes to a community college in Kansas called Hutch Community College. Okay? Then he goes to a school, a 4-year college called Wichita State. Then he goes from there to the Ivy Leagues, to this an Ivy League school, which is a really successful school, to get a master's degree. And then he becomes one of these very successful magazine producers. So you hear the story and you say, okay, well, clearly this guy was always really, really smart. He was always really talented. He was always gifted. He just didn't know it. He said, no, that's not the story. 12 years later, as the guy tells the story, 12 years later, after he's living in his family and he's successful, he gets a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. He doesn't think anything about it. His wife asks him, "Are you going to open it?" He opens it. Well, it turns out every year, the company that runs the SAT test will review how they administer the test. The year he had taken the test, 12 years earlier, he was one of 13 people sent the wrong score. His actual score was a 740 out of 1600. Okay? Now he says, people want to tell me that when I got that 1480 on that test, that's what changed my life. But he said the truth is, when I started acting like a 1480, that's what changed my life. And what does a 1480 do? He goes to class. So the two stories that were shared with us at that point in a bad football program and a bad team with a lot of players who were struggling was, if you have a general understanding of what somebody who has something you want does, then you can get it. Okay? So if those athletes that wanted a ring, if they wanted to get it, there would be a way to do it. Okay? When Dalvin Cook left Miami and came to Florida State, there was going to be a way to come there and succeed. Okay? That path was going to be there. It was going to be in what we would just say, really simply, doing simple better. All right? Doing simple better. So if we'll just use Russell because his agent's here as an example. Let me give you a little bit of insight into Russell's life. So it hasn't all been easy. Russell's been divorced, but he remarried Sierra 2 years ago. Sierra had been engaged to a rapper named Future. They have a child, the child's baby Future. And so they had, ultimately, after the Super Bowl, Russell had a Super Bowl 4 years ago. He threw an interception at the 1 yard line. Okay? Now, at that Super Bowl, at that moment, the game started, there were 108 million people watching. At that moment in the final play, there were 123 million people watching that play, which is approximately 1/3 of the United States. It was watching that moment, watching that play. So he had the combination of a marriage ending and that adversity at the same time, and failure, right? Because let's be honest, you're not going to hear me talk about positive thinking. We never talked about that at Fort State, being positive. What we really tried to understand was, how do we minimize being negative? Because life's hard. Life's going to have its challenges, but people are going to get through it. And there's always a way to get through it. So in that moment, in that adversity, in that challenge, And in her moment, in her adversity, in her challenge, they found a way, and ultimately they would meet each other. And we had a decision to make, and this is the simple thing, and I want you to understand that. After that event, after they would meet, we said, you have a 3-month window before the next season starts. What would people who have a really good off season, okay, what would they do? And let's do that. Right? We can't get rid of the interception. We can't get rid of the divorce. Can't get rid of the challenges. Those happen. Okay? Those are real. But what happens next is going to be based on what we do next. Do you understand that? So the next relationship, will it be different than the past one? It depends. It's what you do, what type of person you try to find, what you're looking for. Okay? The next play you get, will it be the same as the last one? Well, it hasn't happened yet, but what are you willing to do? So he wrote down a goal. He said, I want to run my 40-yard dash at 4.4. I want to be a faster, more explosive athlete. Okay? All right, so we need to go down to San Diego, California. We need to find the best speed trainer that we can. We went and interviewed a bunch of people, and we said, we want to get out of Seattle because Seattle had not forgot about the moment or the play. They hadn't forgotten. Okay? We wanted to forget about it. So we went down and then literally made a decision, just like the Dorito and the apples. Every morning, he was going to open up 30 minutes of reading and prayer. Okay? Right after that, we were going to watch a game that he had played in the fourth quarter where he'd come back and won the game. Next thing we were going to do is we were going to go to a place and we were going to train. They were going to help him eat better, train, do the things from there. After that, we would go boxing. After that, we would come back and go to the pool. After that, we would train some more. Okay? And he did that for 7 weeks. And then followed the most difficult play in front of 122 million people with the best season of his career. Okay? So what's the point? Well, he's 5'9 3/4. He's too small. He's too... Nobody can give you something that you don't have. You have what you have. So one of the biggest challenges, if you were to ask me, one of the biggest challenges, what turned Florida State University around to become a great football program? What can turn it around for anybody is, are you using what you have? Are you using what you have? Because you can't get, I'm 5'10". It is what it is. Right? I'm kind of a goofy, poor man's looking version of James Bond. It is what it is. Okay? I've got what I have. But to the degree that I can use what I have, that's on me. Okay? And the last point I want to make is this. Anybody ever watch commercials? Right? You see commercials, see TV? Commercials can affect us, right? They can get us to want to buy things and get us to want to buy brands, okay? Just like outside people can affect us. Can the people in our lives have an impact on how we feel and how we think and what we do, yes or no? Yeah. Right, so it's challenging. So when we first got to Florida State, we wanted to understand, if I come from a tough circumstance, if I've been in a tough environment, if I've been in a tough situation, does that determine what my path is going to be? So we wanted to understand that. So we can't pretend that being in circumstances that are less than perfect don't affect us. In the same way that a TV commercial says, I got to buy this type of shoes or whatever. Okay? But how much does that TV commercial or what other people say, this is your destiny, when they're telling you what you're going to be, how much is that influence versus your influence? Well, what we learned was that my influence on you is 1/10 as powerful as what you think about you. Your influence is 10 times more powerful than anybody outside you. And when people want to say, well, how does a guy like Russell Wilson at 5'9" make it? It's because his own belief influences him way more than anybody else's belief. So, yes, I'm 5'9", I'm not 6'5". Yes, I don't have the same gifts that Cam Newton or other people have. Yes, I've been at multiple schools. Yes, I've had this adversity. But that's the truth. But I also will get up. I will go to school. I will train. I will prepare. I will choose an apple over Doritos if that's what it means for my goal. I will do the little things that I need to do to give myself a best chance to be the best version of myself. Does that make sense? So the one thing I want you to think about, okay? If you were to come into the University of Georgia and you were to be one of 120 people that was going to play, the first thing we would ask you is, what do you want? And to really think, because anything that happens in our life comes from what we want. You got to start there. Okay? I just got divorced. It's a really challenging person. I want to meet another really cool person. I want to believe that can happen for me, right? Because it wasn't fun to go through it. So what do I want? And then I have to ask myself the next question: why don't I have it? Why don't I have it right now? Okay? And if I don't, and then okay, if I understand why I don't have it, then what can I do to get it? All right. So if I don't have it because let's say it's a physical thing, because I'm up too late or because of some situation, I can immediately do the exact opposite of that. Okay? And then I have to come up with a plan. I'm going to do these 5 things. So if you were to look at just using Russell as an example, if you were to look at his locker, it says 3 things: great balance, great fundamentals, be engaged. Okay? Be engaged. So being engaged means it's your life, not my life to live for you. It's your life, not my life to live for you. Other people have a lot of opinions about how you should live your life, yes or no? I'm going to tell you this: I'm not coming here to tell you or to have an opinion on how you should live your life or to understand your circumstances or whatever. But what I do know in my 44 years on this planet and seen some things around is I've seen some people that have been in really good circumstances that have made decisions and taken their life down the wrong way, and people who've been in some tougher circumstances and got behind the things: if I do A, B, and C, I'm going to get D. And sometimes it's as easy as an apple versus Doritos, if you want it. Does that make sense? Growing up and spending time, I was more of the YMCA, but the people here that are willing to give you some different people to come in and present, take advantage of those opportunities. You know, I work for the New York Mets, and our general manager talks about this interesting concept called the aggregate of marginal gains. He basically says, if I sleep well, I get a point. If I go to this class, I get a point. If any little thing I do starts to move me in the direction I want to go. Just like if I don't do it, it can take me from it. So I appreciate the opportunity to come in. I appreciate Mark giving me a chance as a huge fan of this community. And I know that there's a lot of really high performers that come out of this area. So this makes my day to get a chance to come spend some time with you guys, okay? So thank you. Have a good day. Is there any questions? Yeah.
Who was your favorite person to come and talk to?
Who's my favorite person?
Well, yeah.
That I've heard?
Yeah, out of the teams and stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy named Chris Herren. And he's got if you ever watch ESPN or these 30 for 30s, he's got a really powerful story. He was a really good basketball player in Boston, and he got sidetracked for 13 years with drugs. And he's one of the most incredible speakers I've ever heard. So Chris Herren would be my favorite. I mean, Ray Lewis was good. I mean, it's Ray Lewis, right? You know, so he was really good. I've had a chance to hear President Obama speak. I thought he was incredible. He didn't speak to a football team, but he spoke at an event I was at. Any other questions?
They get Khalil Mack to come in here every now and then. He's a big supporter of the clubs and went to high school in this area,
sure.
He's been a big sports direction for them.
He's our highest paid defensive player now in the league. He's a professional. From everything I've heard, certainly when he was in Oakland, a great teammate. He's got a great reputation. He does the apple Doritos. He knows how to choose which is better for him relative to his journey. So he's earned a lot of respect. University of Buffalo, he kind of put them on the map. So from Fort Pierce to Buffalo.
It's a nice deal. One time when I was here, I heard somebody come off the court, and they were talking pretty much to themselves about whatever went on the court, and it just wasn't positive at all. They were kicking themselves. And then I heard you speaking once, I don't know, ESPN podcast or something, about what people should say when they talk to themselves to give them more of a positive direction. Is that something you can recall to give them?
All I would tell you guys is this, let's just take Georgia football, for example. We're really careful about language. So when you say something out loud, like today's going to be another crap day. When you verbalize that, it's a lot more powerful than when you just think it inside. So we actually don't try to get people to say positive things. We just focus on not saying the negative things, because the negativity is almost 70 times more powerful than positivity. So when you're facing a challenge and you keep talking about it, then you're competing against the challenge and your stupid words coming out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. So we just don't say it. But sometimes, let's be honest, you don't feel like the positive thing doesn't feel real in that moment. But I don't want to give extra power to the negative thing. When I was 18 years old and I was sick, and a lot of people, like, you're no sicker the day after a diagnosis with cancer than you were the day before, but you feel different, right? So you got to be careful with the label, how you talk about it. So, don't say anything out loud that's not going to help you, right? That doesn't mean you have to say things out loud that will help you, but just don't say things out loud that won't help you. That's what we've learned.
So somebody coming off a court that just had a bad quarter, what should they do to get themselves a good quarter?
Probably the biggest thing is just keep your mouth shut. If it's
That's
anything,
hard.
I got nothing to say. At that point, because truthfully, I played college basketball, so not great, but I was a point guard. So from a basketball perspective, is what the truth is, and you just got to start thinking about what can I do in the second quarter to change it. My first college basketball game was against Loyola Marymount, and I had 11 turnovers in the first half. That wasn't a good thing. My coach had to remind me what color jersey we were playing, which was not fun to get either, but it was pretty funny. I had to get it. So I didn't play the second half.
So you've worked with some of the best college football and basketball coaches in the country. Guys who win, like Billy Donovan,
Yes.
Florida basketball, national champion, a bunch of national champions in football, right? Those coaches, when they go to communities like this,
Yes.
places to recruit,
Yes.
and they walk in and talk to the head coach, the head high school coach, about the kids in this program,
Yes.
what are the 2 or 3 questions they always ask that coach? What are they looking for?
I think the number one thing, let's say, and Nick Saban comes down here, and he's looking for players from this community, which they do. There's a lot of great people, students, performers, and athletes, and talented people that come out of Southwest, Southeast Florida. Certainly the Treasure Coast. They're going to want to know that you're going the right direction. You don't have to have lived a perfect life, but if you go to the Boys and Girls Club, if you're attempting to help yourself be better, and you have gifts, you have talent, and they believe in their own programs, they can bring you to Gainesville. If it's Billy Donovan, the head basketball coach at the University of Florida for 18 years, you know what? I like his gifts, I like his talent. He's working hard. What maybe wasn't perfect in school, but teachers say that he was trying, or she was trying as who she was as a sophomore. She evolved to be a junior and senior and started turning it around. They'll make an investment. I think they get scared if you might be going the other direction. But look, if for those of you that have aspirations, it's all about what you do next. It's all about what you do next. For me, it's all about what I do next. It's all about what you do next. There's not a lot we can do to change whatever's happened. And don't think about making big changes. Think about making small changes. If you're interested in changing, because I'm going to tell you this, to be average in life is fine. We need a lot of average people, but it's not because you're born average, it's because you behave average. So if you want something better, sometimes you can just do something different. And if it's really good for you right now, if everything's going good, then keep doing what you're doing. Cool? All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
As far as if you've already graduated and you're actually trying to still, you can probably at the next level, maybe say like post-grad or prep school. And you actually play prep school, but instead of like once they're trying to play like overseas or something, how would finding an agent be like
you know, I mean, Russell found Mark on the internet, you know, and called him. Russell Wilson, we literally found him that way. I mean, Russell recruited Mark, not Mark recruiting Russell Wilson. So I think if you were to play a post-grad year and then skip college and go overseas, you know, you'd want to find a good overseas agent, somebody that's done that, right? We had the Ball family. I think LeVar Ball went and played in Ukraine or something. For basketball, obviously, junior college or college is a pretty good route. Football, you know, the same way. Soccer, you know, going to Europe. I mean, but you got to do what you got to do to keep your dream alive. So I don't know a lot of great basketball agents, but I do know that they exist. But a lot of them, you know, literally best agent helping players get abroad. Basketball. That's probably what I would do. You know, there are big agencies, IMG, CAA, William Morris, you know, that probably have agents. But I will tell you this, if you want to be a basketball player, if your path veers off a little bit, there's really no straight line. You know, I spent a season with the Memphis Grizzlies, a season with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and a season with the LA Clippers. All three of those teams, and not everybody was a top 5 pick. Westbrook, his first 2 years at UCLA, didn't play. You know, and people forget about that. He came from Inglewood, which is in you know, Los Angeles, and he really hit his stride as a junior. You know, and Westbrook in basketball right now, well, he's our highest paid athlete in the world right now at $46 million a year, Russell Westbrook. So he had a different path to get there.
It's good stuff.
All right, let's go.